Nearly all EU countries have developed coronavirus tracing apps. They promise to help break the chain of infections by complementing manual tracing.
The United States is the home of big tech, and yet it's become one of the last developed countries to introduce contact tracing apps.
Russia doesn't have any COVID-warn apps so far, but one thing is clear. If there was one, we wouldn't have the same discussion about the safety of private sphere like in Germany, for example, because the state structures often don't care, control comes first, and people also then don't care a lot.
Bridge to Health is a pan-India mobile application. It's the world's most downloaded contact tracing app. But don't put too much behind those numbers, as this is India, and as a share of population, that number is just 7.4%.
Unfortunately, there are no publicly available numbers how many people have downloaded the app or are still using it, at least. My personal feeling is that it's not too many.
The crucial question here is data storage, be it centralized or decentralized. Almost all EU apps follow the decentralized model, meaning that the data stays on the phone.
In a surveillance state like China, a COVID app or COVID tracing app is of course not really a turning point. In this society here, a lot of aspects of life happen online, and state organs ultimately have the prerogative to access all data.
So far, about half of the 50 US states, plus Washington DC, have introduced or are preparing to launch contact tracing apps, and most of those new apps are based on the Apple-Google exposure notification system.
Only France and Hungary have opted for a centralized architecture. The German contact tracing app could be a role model for future government IT projects. With the use of open source software and the transparent communication around it, it was a blueprint for the Belgian tracing app that was just launched in September. 21 million downloads in Germany and 1 million downloads in Belgium show that people are willing to use such tools to fight the pandemic.
An app-like system has only been established in Moscow in the midst of October. All visitors of bars and nightclubs have to register by scanning a QR code with their mobile phone. If one of the visitors falls ill, the others will get a warning SMS.
Using the phone's Bluetooth and location data, Arogya Setu lets users know if they have been near a COVID-affected person by scanning a database of known cases of infection. The data is then shared with the government. So there is this constant access to the phone's Bluetooth, which experts say is invasive from a security and privacy perspective.
If you want to take a flight inside Turkey, or if you want to take a domestic bus or a train, or even now if you want to enter a public building like a ministry or any other public building, you need to present what is called a HES code, which is a code that you can get through this app, which is used then to track travelers in case there's any infection on their train, their plane, or whatever.
Various apps that can be used. Some of them are standalone apps, some of them can be integrated into the main apps that people use here, like WeChat or Alipay, a payment app. So in my case, I use it embedded in WeChat. So it's a mini program called HealthKit. For the Beijing context, as you can see, it's not anonymous, lists my name. If I click query on me, it even has my passport picture there. I use it mostly to register in a certain location. So it's not really a contact tracing app that works through Bluetooth or something like that, but I check into a restaurant or even our office tower here where our office is located. It scans the QR code of that particular location. After scanning, security often checks that you did it properly.
All apps in Europe are voluntary so far, but there are discussions flaring up to make them mandatory from time to time. Civil society's concerns have been taken into consideration in the EU. In Germany, a letter by NGOs led to a shift from the centralized to the decentralized model. There was also a clear call for a strict purpose limitation of the app, meaning that it can only be used for contact tracing and not for anything else. For example, law enforcement.
It's completely voluntary, at this point, and the government also, I think, did not advertise it that much, which also leads to a low level of penetration.
The centralized storage of the data and use of the application for surveillance is an intended design choice. In contrast, there are a number of contact tracing apps worldwide that not only notify users if they are at risk, but they leave it to them to self-report.
The Apple-Google system relies on Bluetooth low-energy signals to determine the proximity of two people over an extended period of time. The system does not collect or store personal data such as phone numbers or GPS location data.
The state structures in Moscow, for example, collected the data, mobile phone numbers of people who were infected and of people who had to stay at home in self-isolation. They were surveyed 24 hours per day and punished if they left their houses, and maybe even just to bring garbage to the garbage bin.
In addition to collecting large amounts of data, large amounts of personal information from users when they sign up, Arogya Setu constantly builds on this data in real time, allowing the app to create sort of a social graph of a person's interactions.
And similar to the EU, the next big test will be interoperability. Some metropolitan regions, such as New York and New Jersey, where people cross state lines to commute to work, for example, are now able to exchange anonymized verification codes of infected people via a national key server.
A lot more sophisticated is the surveillance system that we have in a lot of, especially the big cities in Russia, thanks to face detection and thanks to geolocation of mobile phone numbers. About 60 subjects of the Russian Federation use these or other technologies to look for people and to spy on them. It is called social monitoring.
While there is a very strong data protection law in line with the EU data protection regulation, the enforcement is very difficult, or it's very hard to see how that's done, especially living in a country that is semi-authoritarian, so where the government is possibly like listening into calls, is possibly tracking other sensitive information.
The government's intention behind this app introduction might be good, but the growing fears as to the individual's privacy relating to data is not unwarranted. This app might become a personal mass surveillance instrument.
So far, contact tracing apps in the US have respected citizens' rights, but it will be important to monitor if it stays that way.
Contact tracing apps are only one of many tools to fight the pandemic. If it turns out that they don't work or don't fulfill their purpose, this experiment has to be stopped.